Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for this Friday art-based meditation session from Freer and Sackler, the Smithsonian's National Museum of Asian Art. My name is Grace Murray and I'm really delighted to welcome you today, welcome you back for those of you who continued to join us, and welcome for the first time if there are new people on the session today. I'm happy to introduce our session today, which is around the theme of resting in the flow. As you've seen, today's session will be led by Aparna Sadananda, and our focus will be on a Japanese woodblock print from the 1830s by the artist Hokusai. It's a really beautiful artwork, and I think you'll enjoy it a lot. Following the meditation, Kit Brooks, Japan Foundation Assistant Curator for Japanese Art at the museum, will give a spotlight talk about the artwork and will be available to answer your questions. Now I'm going to turn it over to Aparna to begin the session. Thanks, Aparna.
Thank you so much, Grace, for kickstarting our session today. And today, as Grace shared, our artwork today takes us to Japan. It's a woodblock print by Hokusai. So let's start by taking a look at the artwork. And I'd like to present to you this woodblock print by Hokusai, which is titled The Waterfall at Amida. So let's take our first glance of this artwork. Just notice whatever your eyes are naturally drawn to. It's about a feet tall, about, I think, 9 inches wide. And then just before we go on to take a closer look at the details of this woodblock print, let's pause the screen sharing just for a moment so we can center our attention and come back to this artwork again. Maybe adjusting your posture, please come to a comfortable seated position. And again, if you'd like to continue looking at the artwork while we center our attention, you can always click at the link that Grace just shared in the chat. So maybe close your eyes or gaze down. Let's bring awareness to the presence of the body where we are in space and time right now. Where does the body connect with all that which is supporting the body? What are the sensations that seem to stand out in your awareness right now? And what are the qualities of the breath at this moment? Let us notice all of this, like we're creating a timestamp of how the body and the breath are as we begin our mindful exploration of today's artwork. And from that, we'll quickly check in with different spaces of the body, noticing whatever sensations are present in each part of the body as I mention it. And if you notice there are no sensations there, just observe that. Maybe start by bringing our attention to the feet, the shins and calves, knees, thighs, hips and feet, lower back, upper back, shoulders, chest, waist, upper arms, elbows, forearms, hands, the neck, the face, and the head. Let's now try to quickly bring awareness to the entire body and all of these sensations. So we feel a slightly more intimate connection to the body, like attention is inhabiting the body. We're embodying the self a little more wherever we are, just as we are. And if you notice that you need to make any movements or make adjustments to your posture, anything, feel free to do that so we can relax into where we are just as we are. Sometimes the breath can be useful there. You could try inhaling through the nose and squeezing all the muscles at once. And then let go with a deep sigh. If you found that useful and you'd like to repeat that, please go ahead. And then, whenever you feel a little more present and you're a little more relaxed, to bring awareness to this artwork, slowly open your eyes and keeping the gaze soft and relaxed. Take a look at the overall artwork. Where are your eyes naturally drawn to? And as the eyes see that, what's happening in the mind body? We'll keep checking in from time to time. For now, as you look at this artwork, what is your immediate response? Now we'll start from the center of this painting, from the top center. And let's just zoom in. So we can take a closer look at the details. As the rippling waters of this river, framed on both sides, this circular rock. Then the vegetation on both sides. Notice how the blues and the greens transition into each other. Maybe you're now looking at this small piece of writing here at the top left corner of your screen, the artwork. If you don't know the language, does it make you wonder what it could be, what it could mean? Slowly, we'll move our attention, move our gaze down. Begin further details that inform us of the landscape around this waterfall at Amida. As we slowly move our awareness down here, you might notice 3 pilgrims who are seated on a blanket. It looks like they're having a picnic and time to rest. One of the three pilgrims preparing tea, perhaps, and the other two having a conversation. You wonder what they could be chatting about with each other. And slowly, maybe zooming out, come back to where the river falls. Noticing the flow of water. Maybe now your attention is drawn to the sides so we can appreciate how the water has carved the rocks over time. This very beautiful tree curving where this cliff. See, the tree has been a witness to the sculpting of the rocks by this river and the waterfall. Let's come back to look at the entire artwork at once. Maybe check in with the body, check in with the mind. What are the sensations in the body now? What is the quality of thoughts in the mind? And when that feels complete, let's focus on the water, on the element of water that's represented in this artwork. Imagine our lives as this flowing river. River having a certain destination, but just like our lives also having a certain final destination, but also having many destinations all along the way. But the flow of that water reminds us of our ability to find ease with where we are. The river always finds its way, no matter how the path is. How can we cultivate that quality of least resistance to what life is at this moment? If you'd like to embody this quality in the form of a hand mudra or a gesture, I invite you to try out a mudra known as Jala Mudra or the water mudra. We'll touch the tips of the thumb and the little finger to each other. And we'll do that with both hands, stretching out the other three fingers. And then we could rest the back of the hands onto the thighs, the sides of the body, and just maybe close our eyes, noticing the inner environment responding to this change in the hand gesture. And if you find that resonate with the practice of this mudra, you could use this hand gesture as a gentle reminder from time to time to find this quality of ease, just like the river in this painting. And now we'll zoom into this uppermost part of the river where we see a lot of ripples. And here, that the wavy nature of those lines invite us to pay attention to the wave of the breath itself, the rise and the fall of the breath. Maybe we could experience that in the chest, place a hand on the heart, or we could practice breathing while still holding the Jala Mudra. And a third option, also imagine you're breathing through these ripples, inhaling, tracing with your eyes the rise of a wave. And as you exhale, tracing fall of that wave. You can breathe through each of those wavy lines in this part of the painting. Let's practice this for about a minute. And you feel like you practiced enough awareness to the breath and to the waves of the river. Take a moment to let go of all the effort. Just witness mind-body experience. Where do you notice the most prominent sensation now? More importantly, where do you notice the quality of ease? And when that brief contemplation and check-in feels complete, let's deepen our awareness to the breath. With this part of this meditation, you may practice closing the eyes, or you may continue to gaze at the river and the waterfall. You could also choose to place both palms on the heart and then begin to deepen our breath through Ujjayi breathing, gently engaging the throat like we're trying to clear the throat. We'll breathe in and out. And as you trace the path of the breath through the nostrils and throat into the chest, you may imagine this just like this river in the artwork, the river flowing up to the tip or the edge of that waterfall. The wave of the breath rising and falling in the chest, just like the ripples in the water of the river. Sometimes when we practice the Ujjayi breath with a little more effort, it sounds like the wave. We can allow ourselves to relax to that wave-like sound. And when we are attuned to the wave in the chest, we could now allow that wave of breath to trickle down like the fall of the river at the edge, the fall of the wave of breath into the ribs. Imagine the breath flowing and falling into the ribs as the ribs expand to the inhale and the ribs softening to the exhale. Now let that breath fall further down into the belly. As we breathe in, the belly expands and softens as we exhale. And now the breath falling all the way down into the pelvis, like the waterfall collecting at the base. And if for any reason you do not wish to meditate on the pelvis, let's come back to the breath in the chest, ribs, belly. You're practicing with pelvic awareness. Imagine the breath going down like a river, down the chest, falling into the ribs, belly, all the way down to the pelvis. And as you exhale, breath washing away anything that needs to be released into the earth through the points of contact. Let's practice this breathing with the awareness that the breath is life force itself. So the flow of the breath, flow of the river of breath, is like the flow of pranic energy through the body. Imagine this river flowing into the arms, into the legs, into the neck and the head. The whole body seems to be bathed in this river of life. And it's life giving, life enhancing energy. Take a few more breaths. Now notice where you feel the qualities of fluidity, ease, being able to adapt. You can rest in the flow. Imagine if you were one of those three pilgrims sitting beside this waterfall, meditating on the waterfall this way. What does it feel like in that moment when the observer and that which is being observed become one? Let us surrender all the efforts so we can continue to experience the yoga or the union, the one who observes that which is being observed. And whenever you feel ready to come out of that experience, slowly begin to deepen the breath, be joining palms in prayer. And let's acknowledge the light within with a silent namaste to the self. And namaste to Hokusai for providing us with this artwork so its creative energy could inspire this meditation today. Namaste to all the yogis, the sages, the various teachers of different traditions of yoga, for carrying that wisdom through space and time. We could all benefit from it today. And finally, may we close by sharing a namaste with each other, like we're saying, the light in me honors the light in you. Thank you all so much for coming along with me in this journey of resting in the flow, inspired by the Waterfall of Amida by Hokusai. So I hope, dear yogis, that you enjoyed this way of exploring an artwork through experiencing it by being in its presence, being in its creative energy. Now let's move on to Grace and then to Kit as we explore and learn about this artwork from a more intellectual perspective. Once again, namaste. Please take care.
Thank you so much, Aparna. Thank you for transporting us to another place through that artwork. And now I'd like to welcome Kit Brooks, who's going to tell us a little more about it.
I just wanted to say thank you, Aparna, as always, for leading such a beautiful session. And I'm going to jump right in here with the art historical perspective, which I'm sorry to say is going to be far less relaxing, I'm sure. But this print is from one of a series of 8 prints that each show the famous waterfalls on the main island of Japan, or Honshu. And all of the waterfalls in this set were well-known sites of religious pilgrimage, both in Hokusai's time and today. And so this image, as we've said, depicts the Amida waterfall, which is in Gifu Prefecture. And you may be wondering why it's called the Amida waterfall, Amida being the name of one of the Buddhas. So the name of the waterfall comes from its shape. And I'm going to need you to bear with me a little bit here and humor me. And also to Okara, who's controlling the cursor right now. But the outline of the waterfall that you can see in this print is said to resemble the shape of the Buddha Amida in prayer. So there is the Buddha's head at the top, just underneath the circular hole where the water is coming from, and with the torso below. And so there's a protrusion on the top of the head that you can just see in the white outline at the top. And that protrusion is the Ushnisa, which is the cranial protuberance that we always see on Buddhist sculptures as one of the 32 signs of the Buddha's body. So the Buddha is in 3/4 profile, and then there are these series of bubble-shaped scalloped ridges along the right-hand side, which are the folds of the robe as his robes cascade down from his shoulders and sides. And so this view of this waterfall as being in the shape of the Buddha is enhanced by this famous round aperture at the top, which is where the waterfall comes from. And that's thought to resemble the halo that conventionally appears behind the Buddha's head. And so this kind of impression would only have been amplified during the daytime when light would have shone through this hole, illuminating the waterfall and creating the mirage of this Amida Buddha from behind in this blaze of brilliant glory, like a halo. And Hokusai himself was known to be quite devoted in terms of his interest in locations like this, where the natural beauty of a specific site was seen as a conduit for divine energy, a belief that is very common in the animistic religion of Shinto, but equally prevalent for places like this, where Buddhas were believed to manifest as well, such as the case here. Waterfalls are really popular sites for religious practice, and particularly in this ascetic mountain sect, which was known as Shugendo. And this was a particularly rigorous and solitary tradition. So in this practice, monks would meditate beneath waterfalls, and that's physically very demanding and incredibly painful, as the water would pound onto your back, making it very difficult to concentrate. And for members of these kinds of sects, this kind of physical endurance created the ideal conditions for them to reach higher states of awareness and spiritual awakening. And so from this picture, we can imagine a monk seated in meditation underneath this waterfall with this enormous avatar of the Buddha standing above them and surrounding them and serving as a motivation and a visualization of the ultimate goal of their devotions. But I also think that we can appreciate the waterfall and this print just as a beautiful location as well. And the group of men that you can see picnicking on the outcropping at the left make it easy for us to insert ourselves into this landscape because we can imagine being them or being among them. And you can imagine the sounds and the smells of the waterfall and what they would be like with the wind moving through the trees. And just above those picnickers, you can see this kind of lighter colored patch, this like billowing smoke almost, which is this mist cloud, which acts as a balance to the weight of the solid rock outcropping on the right. And for me, just looking at this, I can feel the spray of the waterfall on my skin and the sounds of the waterfall as it hits the rocks. I think a big part of the print's success is the color palette. And this print, like the series as a whole, it makes really, really heavy use of this newly commercially available chemical blue pigment called Berlin blue, which had only started appearing in prints just 1 or 2 years before this print was made. In fact, even the vibrant green that you can see throughout the print, that kind of appears as a trademark of Hokusai's landscape prints. And it was made through mixture of this chemical blue with gamboge yellow. And finally, I just want to talk a little about the fact that, so we don't know if Hokusai himself ever actually visited this site, or whether it was an image that was a pastiche formed from different kinds of travel guides of the time, which were very popular and very heavily illustrated. So this was a very common practice and would have been very helpful to Hokusai's audiences, as travel was popular during the Edo period, but still unattainable for most ordinary people. And most people that viewed this print wouldn't have been to the site themselves. And what makes an image of a print recognizable to these audiences was how closely it would resemble previous depictions, rather than its fidelity to the landscape itself. And this is something that would have been built into the language of the time, because in Hokusai's day, this would not have been called a landscape picture. It would have been called a meishoe, or a famous place picture. And places like this were landmarks because they were the sites where famous poems had been composed or battles had been fought, and elements of the surroundings had been represented in verse and poetry many, many times over. So they're kind of vibrating with collective memory. In this case, it was an 8th century monk who discovered this waterfall, and then a 15th century monk who achieved enlightenment underneath it. And he was the person who gave the name of this waterfall, the Amida Falls. So the places in these pictures are famous because of all the collective memories that viewers would associate with them, whether the viewer has actually been to the location or not, the viewer of the image. And so I'm very happy that we've added another layer through Apana, add another through layer of this collective memory to this work and this place today. So thank you very much. And if you're interested in Hokusai, I should say you should check out all the online resources for the current exhibition of Hokusai Mad About Painting, which is curated by our very own Dr. Frank Feltons. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kit. That was wonderful. We had a few questions come in the chat. One was more about the people there, and asking, are those 2 samurai on the mat and a servant with them?
Yeah, you can see that the 2 on the white mats have swords, which at this point would have made them of the samurai status. And then, yeah, it's likely that the person on the smaller yellow covered buff mat is preparing refreshments for them. That box that's in front of them, which you can sort of see has these tiered shelves, would have contained food and refreshments. So
Tamina asks about what kind of materials were used to make this print. You talked about the blue pigment, but do you want to say anything else about the process in general?
Sure. So the way that these prints were made were really a collaborative effort. So when we talk about print artists of this period, they were really the draftsmen. So Hokusai would have prepared the draft of this image and the sketch, and then this would have been passed on to a carver who would have prepared the blocks, and then another person would have printed it through the different colors. So it's a really collaborative effort. And for me, although the pigments are incredible, but also the paper itself is always such a important part of these prints. It's very robust and so it can endure being printed many times through different color blocks. So the paper is just as important in a way as the pigments are.
And has the color faded over time, or do you think this is roughly what the colors would have looked like when it was made?
I think this is probably roughly what the colors would have looked like, because the chemical blue the blue in this print is mostly a chemical blue and indigo, which are quite color fast, robust colors. Prints of earlier periods that use more vegetal dyes often fade very much over time, especially purples and some of the reds. So there often are color changes, but particularly the blue in this case, and then the green that's made as a mixture from it, are going to be, incredibly vibrant. And traditional woodblock print carvers and printers in Japan today who are doing it according to the traditional methods, produce things that look very, very similar to this, using the same kind of pigments as we used back then.
We had a question about how the artwork came into the museum collection, and I see from the accession number it joined the collection in 1974. Is that right?
Yeah, and I believe this is from, so a lot of our woodblock prints that are in the Freer collection. So Charles Lang Freer famously didn't have in his original gift to the Smithsonian, did not include prints. But a lot of the prints, and some of them did come from his collection through Agnes Meyer, and this is who this print came from. So Agnes Meyer and the Meyer family were associates of Freer, and so we received some things from her estate, which I believe is this one.
Yeah. Jeannie asks, I'm having trouble seeing the Buddha in the waterfall. Could you maybe tell us more about exactly where that is?
Sure. So I haven't got control of the cursor. So Cara, I'm sorry about this again. But if we're starting at the top here, so if there's the circle where the water is coming from, imagine that as the halo behind and above the Buddha's head. And then where the white water is cascading over the top, that's the top of the Buddha's head. And so just think of it in terms of the outline. So there's the bump on top of the Buddha's head, like you see in sculpture, and then the face going down to the shoulders. Hope that helps, Jeannie. It's a little bit like a magic eye, and be as sympathetic as you can. It's difficult to imagine a Buddha in any waterfall. So as far as they go, I think this is a compelling case.
Someone else in the chat mentioned that it seems like a really abrupt transition from the circle of water at the top to the waterfall beginning. And I think you mentioned that it's representing kind of a lake at the top.
So sorry to interrupt you there, Grace. So if you imagine where the water is coming from, and for me, I've always loved this print because I think that it's almost like a flip in perspective almost between the water flowing above and then the water flowing down. So there is a certain amount to which this is definitely representational, but I think also it's such a stunning thing. You never forget it once you've seen it. The way that this perspective almost shift works. For me also, looking at that, the lake above, it's almost like a wood grain, that kind of patination in the flow of the water. So it's just a great reinforcement of the way that the work itself was made through the wood blocks.
Thank you so much, Kit. Thank you for sharing that information with us about the print. I think it really took us to another level of understanding about it and learning more, not just about the aesthetic qualities, but also some of the history and cultural influences behind it. This was really beautiful. Thank you both to Kit and Aparna, and we hope to welcome you back. I also should mention that Kit is doing a lot of work on our Japanese print collection at the museum, so you can look forward in the future to exhibitions that they will curate that will feature beautiful prints like this in the museum, and that's going to be coming up in the next few years. I wish everyone a wonderful weekend.